Okay, so welcome to the third quarter NG911 GIS user group meeting. Glad you all can join us. Looks like we have over 40 participants, and I know a few of you dial in together on the line, so thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're going to go through our usual agenda. It's a combination of project updates. Sherry Massey will talk about GeoMSAG, Geospatial Call Routing update. Kristen Jordan will talk about the NG911 Toolbox. And then I'll touch on just a quick item about the portal and some future events coming up on the NG911 project. So first thing I always like to give you a summary of our statistics for the previous quarter. Again, we had fantastic participation, so thank you to everyone for participating and getting your data updates submitted. For the second quarter, we actually had 101 counties submit updates, which is pretty tremendous. That's a large amount of data changing and getting updated, so thanks again for that. And just 4 counties verified no changes. So we like to brag that I think that's our highest participation rate, at least in changes being submitted. So it's really high, so we appreciate getting all those updates. The next thing is giving an update on the hosted solution. We now have 85 PSAPs on the hosted solution. I think from the last quarter, PSAPs that have joined the host solution since then has been Potawatomi, Wabaunsee, maybe another one. So everything in the green is now on the hosted solution. I know there's a few in the undecided category there, like purple, that I think have since signed an SOR and will be joining or seriously considering it, will be joining soon. So we anticipate over the next couple of years that number will probably grow to about 90 PSAPs total. And I think that's about where we'll land with the number of PSAPs that are actually on the hosted solution. So we're very excited about that number and getting everyone migrated over. So some more updates on the hosted solution. Currently, the call handlers use a software called Vesta Locate. We got kind of roundabout way got the notification that that software has had an end of life announcement, which we kind of thought was coming. We just didn't have the exact date or timeline announced to us yet. So what we've done is we've started to evaluate a new software that Motorola offers. Again, Motorola used to be Airbus, so that's who is our partner offering this particular software. And the new software is called VestaMap Local. So we are going through, meaning primarily Ken, Sherry, and I, the NG911 administrator, the NG911 liaison, and a few other project partners, are going through and evaluating this new software package. The first phase of this evaluation is they went ahead and installed it at the Yoder backup site. So the group here within Kansas went down and did an evaluation of the software. We had some demos, but we got to actually do some hands-on kind of playing around with the software, took a look at it. So from a user interface, the software looks great. It's more of a kind of a Google Map kind of a view or interface than Vesta Locate. So our next phase is to meet with our partners from Motorola. There's some Geocom did some of the development on the software, so Geocom will be there, and AT&T back at Yoder in September to really discuss the software and get kind of behind the scenes on it. We need some more information on the administration side of things and what it means to migrate all the PSAPs over to the software and just some functionality questions we have before we officially decide if this is the route we're going to go to migrate over. So just so you know, there could be changes coming of some sort to your 911 departments and the actual software they use for their mapping for the call handlers. But we'll keep you updated on that, and I'm sure by the CAM conference we'll have more information on that. So basically what that means for our GIS maintainers is no changes. There will be no change to your GIS submission process or how you, or the GIS data model or anything. Everything will be integrated behind the scenes to support this new software. So just wanted to give you a heads up in case you're communicating with your 911 department about these potential changes. Next item of update, which Sherry Massey will talk about a little bit more later, but I just wanted to touch on the EZNet, or the Emergency Services IP Network. The transition to GEO-IMSAG is completed for 24 PSAPs now, and those 24 PSAPs have actually migrated to the EZNet. So that's the first step is migrate to the hosted solution, and then the second step, in addition to aligning your data and all the hard work you've been doing behind the scenes, is then do some infrastructure things that change them over to the EZNet. So that is progressing actually at a pretty rapid rate on the ground, is transitioning to the EZNet. Just something to note, I thought everyone's like, okay, so with EZNet, so what do we call this, or where are we at now? So we'll eventually get to what's called the full I3 geospatial call routing. And there's still some things dependent on before a PSAP will be considered full geospatial call routing. The first thing is making sure the PSAP has transitioned to an GEO-IMSAG. That's the process of migrating your traditional IMSAG, but recreating it through your GIS data. So we're terming it a GEO-IMSAG. So it's basically your IMSAG created through your GIS data. The second thing is ESB topology. We've added a new check, which Kristen will talk about, looking for topology errors in emergency service boundaries. So we really need that topology to be clean, meaning no gaps or overlaps, before you can migrate over to full geospatial call routing, because we hate for someone to call and fall in a data gap and not have that call routed properly. So that's the reason behind that. And the third thing is there's a software upgrade on the hosted solution that needs to be completed before we're officially migrating over to geospatial call routing. So that upgrade is being tested in the AT&T labs right now. And so once that clears AT&T labs and they decide their deployment schedule, once that's been released and installed at the PSAPs, that's another critical component before we're considered full I3 geospatial call routing. So just some things to consider. There's a lot of steps in there, but I thought I wanted to point out at least those three so you know some of the process involved in migrating all the way over to the full geospatial call routing. The next hot topic is imagery update. So the imagery has all been flown. They were able to fly the entire state this last winter. And Surdex has provided the opportunity to review the imagery using a tool they've developed called SurCheck. It's basically just a QA/QC viewing interface to look at the imagery, see if there's any abnormalities that need to be handled, and then either submit those abnormalities for review or move on to the next area. So what they've done is the state's divided into 3 regions, and then those regions are further subdivided into zones and tiles, just like any imagery you would think, you know, how you can't look at the whole state at once, you got to kind of subdivide it down into manageable chunks. Right now in the SurCheck software, just the west region is available. Surdex is working on processing the imagery and releasing the rest of it. So we're anticipating the central region will be available in mid-September, and the eastern region will be available in early October. Just a couple other things about SurCheck. It's an easy-to-use interface. It's web-based, so you don't have to have any special software or install. You don't have to install anything to actually use it. So we've played around with a lot, submitted some questions, and I think it's just kind of like a GIS software package. If you're familiar with how to pan, zoom, and click around, then you'll have no problem using it. So you should have received an email today from Kristen asking for your help. So the email would have been the NG911 Imagery QA/QC sign-up email. And we sent that, or Kristen sent that, to all of the GIS data maintainers through the NG911 portal. So we did not send that to the data stewards, just to the maintainers. We're looking for kind of our GIS specialists and contacts throughout the state. It's more of a person who actually edits the GIS data or plays with GIS data function versus a steward function. In that email, she provided some instructions as well as a link to sign up to help out if you have time. If you did not receive this email from Kristen but you'd like to help, contact Kristen directly. And in that email, Kristen also included a link. She created a kind of a SurCheck training video, as well as Surdex has a PDF training guide associated with that. So, we have a lot of imagery to review, like the whole state, and we're not asking you to, review an entire zone or area. Just if you could just take a, well, I guess it is called a zone, and it kind of follows instructions. There's essentially the PDF has information about what to look for, what would be a valid abnormality versus what's kind of, you know, not, like pavement changes or fields being plowed, things like that. So I think especially in the rural areas, the process will be pretty quick. You can kind of click through areas that don't have a slight seam line or any major roads or intersections or any major structures in there. So we are just asking anyone who has a little time to help us with a review, give us some help. So Kristen, did you want to add anything to that? No. Okay, so feel free to contact Chris and I with any questions you have about participating in CertCheck. A little bit more about imagery is, I know the biggest question always is, when will the imagery be available? Well, we've got to get through the QA first. So keep in mind the entire state won't even be available for QA until early October. So once we also allow time to go through and review all that imagery, and then allow CertX time to make any corrections if needed, or maybe even schedule some things that we want reflown. You know, we don't know what we'll see in the imagery. We need to allow them time to do some final data processing and actually delivery. So when we're getting closer to having a timeline and when the imagery will be available, we will send an announcement, probably through the 911 portal as well as some of our other listservs that we have. And just a reminder, the imagery is, this version again is licensed, so it is going to be available by request on the desk website. And one thing I should have put in there, if you have an existing link to the Valtis image service, your existing username and password will work on this new imagery. So we'll also send out a notification with that content that when the imagery is available as a service and that your existing credentials will continue to work. So that should be a pretty easy transition, at least for getting access to the imagery. Another reminder is the high resolution BIAP, local BIAP is still available. It's available throughout the full 3-year contract. That agreement is between the jurisdiction and CertX, and I know there's quite a few jurisdictions that have taken advantage of it during the last flying season. So that's still ongoing. Feel free to contact Tim Donzie with CertX if you're interested about getting pricing or just kind of how that process would work there. So that is kind of the update on imagery. We're very excited about getting that new imagery in-house. Okay, with that, let me unmute Sherry here. I gotta find you in the list, Sherry. And I will let Sherry take over. Okay, Sherry, you should be unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Could you go ahead and go to the next slide and I'll get started on the update. So as Eileen said, 24 PSAPs have switched out their MSAGs for GeoMSAGs. And I put a list up here of the next group to convert. What we are doing with the conversions is that they run about 4 a week. As Eileen mentioned, everybody that has a GeoMSAG currently is also with a 911 center who has connected to the EZInet. However, our goal is to get ahead so that the GeoMSAG conversions are happening before the EZInet connection. The reason for that is that once full geospatial call routing is possible, once that software Eileen talked about has been approved and is released to the 911 centers, then you actually can't move to the EZInet without your GIS data already being finished. So our desire is to take this time between now and when that software is ready to go and deployed to convert counties at a good pace so that we're a little bit ahead of the game and have sort of some room for stumbles, because occasionally we will run into those. So when you see this list, just submitted this morning were Morton, Stanton, and Butler, and they will actually convert to a GeoMSAG probably sometime next week. And with Butler goes Augusta and Andover, which are also in Butler County. And then you can probably count off from that. We'll go by 4s, McPherson, Harvey, Cowley, and Marion next week, and then the week after. You kind of get the idea. So occasionally these will switch out, change order, that kind of thing, because of some sort of technical stumbling block that people hit. But generally, this is the order that you can look for. It's important to understand that once a date has been set for your PSAP, if your data is not at 99% or better alignment in the GIS-TN alignment, you can't actually go through this process. So I will send out a notification and say, hey, your data is not yet ready for you to be assigned a date for this transition. So we need you to get it ready as soon as possible because you're in the queue. If you can't get your data to that shape in time, then the date will just keep getting pushed down the road as to when you connect to the EZInet. From a GIS perspective, there's not a huge change for us, whether the 911 center is on the EZInet or not, because our job is still maintain the data and push it up through the portal. Things don't really change that much. But at the 911 center, they get, when they're connected to the EZInet, they get some really impressive capabilities when it comes to how they can transfer and deal with calls. They also have a couple of monthly bills that they have been getting forever that they will stop getting as soon as they're connected to the EZInet. So if there is a delay on connecting to the EZInet, there is actually a cost to that will come forward. So just be aware if you get that notification to communicate, and that the goal here is to get the alignment finished as quickly as possible. And most people are very close. When I say most people, 3/4 easily of the state, if not more, actually quite a bit more than 3/4 now that I think of it, more like 4/5 of the state is well above that 99% marker, and the rest are very close to it. So this shouldn't be too big a deal. I just kind of wanted to let you guys know what the burden is there. So once you have a GeoMSAG in place, the way that you actually get to look at the MSAG that was created from that GIS data, and the way that you get to look at any problems that might have been created by the GeoMSAG is an application called GIS Director. For those of you that mess with the MSAG now, it is a functional replacement for 911 Net. It's kind of like 911 Net with a map in it. The very first GIS Director training will be offered tomorrow, and those counties that either have a GeoMSAG currently or will very shortly have been invited to this initial training. We're trying to keep this initial one small, because we're trying to make sure that we know exactly what pieces of information need to be passed along. The company that provides GIS Director and provides the training for it is still kind of feeling out how Kansas works. And so this is going to be, it's good training, it's quality training, but it is a little bit beta test training to make sure what needs to be added and what doesn't. So the next one, which does not have a set date, but which will be announced once it does, will be a much more open, and will have a sort of a tolerance for a much larger number of attendees. The good news is, from a maintenance perspective, GIS Director is interesting, but not entirely necessary. Truly, once you have a GeoMSAG, your maintenance routine is to submit GIS data. If a telephone needs to get added in an address that doesn't currently exist in the MSAG, you submit GIS data. If you find out there's an error in the MSAG, you submit GIS data. Going into GIS Director is really just a way to look at the data from an MSAG perspective, but it's still just your GIS data. So if you do end up moving to a GeoMSAG in the next several weeks or couple of months, and the GIS Director training is further out than you'd like, the good news is you probably won't be getting in there very often anyway. But this process for the 24 counties in question has brought up an issue that we had to adjust in the toolbox, and I don't know if Kristen will talk about this more later. I imagine that she will. But one of the things that happens is that we send data to West Safety Services, and they perform their own validations on it. It has always been our goal to match validations with them, so that we didn't say something had no errors and then we send it to them and they find errors. Well, unfortunately, they have found a couple of errors inside the data that we have sent that weren't identified in the tests that we had. And the errors that they found were duplicate address points. The reason for that is that our original tests for duplicated address points included zip code and municipality. So you could have 101 Main Street with an MSAG community of Abilene in there a couple of different times if you had different zip codes on them or if you had different municipalities on them. And it's really rare. The number of errors from this have been less than a dozen, but they have come up. So we have had to change that duplicated address point test to make sure that it does not consider zip code or municipality, that it only considers the house number, the parsed out street name, and the MSAG community. The reason that this is in red and that I'm trying to go through this in such detail is because you really need to run this test before a couple of days before the quarterly deadline for submission, because it is possible that you're going to get several errors from it that you did not get previously. Now, like I said, in 24 counties, we've had fewer than a dozen errors that West has identified. So the good news is you're not very likely to run into a major number of errors if past performance is any indication. But it's always possible you're going to. So it's a very good idea to run this test as soon as you can and just make sure what you're looking at well before the maintenance deadline. And this test was changed and is in the toolbox that was released last week. Can you move to the next? So the other thing that I wanted to kind of go over with you guys is just sort of what to expect from this GEO-MSAG process. A lot of the 24 counties that have already gone through it haven't had a huge amount of involvement. We've still been feeling this process out, and a lot of the time we've had to go through the process more than one time. With West, we've had to kind of get everybody's procedures in place. It's not just you guys as the data maintainers and the coordinating council and West. There's also AT&T, and at West there's a couple of departments. At AT&T there's a couple of departments, and it seems like every new hand that touched the data, we stumbled just a little bit somewhere along the way. So it's been a little chaotic, but I do feel like now that I can talk pretty authoritatively about not just what's happening right now, but how it's going to go in the future. The first thing that may come up is you may get questions about your ESNs or your emergency service numbers. That's because we need to know the full list of ESNs associated with the PSAP. And while you as GIS people don't necessarily know that information, what you do know is who responds in the area that you have assigned a given ESN in the PSAP. So you've got that ESN layer and it's got polygons with those ESN numbers, and then you've also got the law, fire, and EMS layers, and they have responders in those areas. So a map has been created called the ELT, or English Language Translation, which is an AT&T term, map that takes your ESN boundaries and joins to those ESN boundaries the police, fire, and EMS responders that AT&T is going to display on the screen for the dispatchers. So we're asking the PSAP to take a look at this map and just see, do those responders make sense? Does the information look correct to you? If the geometry is wrong, then obviously you have to go back into the data and make some changes. But quite frequently what has happened, in fact, almost all of the changes we have had to mess with have been where AT&T had something wrong in the responders. Either they had a bad responder name or a misspelling, or they had old information. So you may get questions about ESNs. You may get questions about how to use that map. But what we're really looking for here is to make sure that the data that sits at AT&T is correct and can actually display responders correctly for the dispatchers. 1 week before your data is submitted, you'll get a notification from me that your data is going to go up the next Monday, and if you have any last-minute edits to submit, you need to do that before the end of the week. It is not something that you have to worry about getting every single thing into, because if you have some more edits that you know are coming or that you haven't quite gotten fixed, once the conversion takes place, you'll be able to submit data updates to make those changes. So really the only time you need to worry about pushing new data out is if you had a bunch of stuff you were sitting on that maybe you were thinking, I'll just handle that at the next quarterly submission. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and get anything like that in there and ready to go. So you'll be notified, and then on the next Monday or Tuesday, depending on the week, I will grab the data and I will send it to West. At that point, we wait, because there's a lot of processing that happens on the back end. And about 10 days later, the conversion will be completed. Once it is, I get notified of a list of all of the telephone records that didn't work in the conversion. This is a really important list, and I will cut it up into pieces and send it back to you and notify you about any that you need to be working on. The reason this list is so important is once you've converted to a GeoMSAG, you actually can't see these telephone records anymore. They're in a special status in the database, a special error status that means that when you sign in, they won't be there for you. So the only way you're going to know about them and the only way you're going to be able to see them is in the list that I provide. We have to get them all cleaned up. There is not a particular deadline to do so, except for the understanding that every week or two I'm going to be bugging you again, because the only way to see them is in the report that I get. So every time I get a report, I'm going to ship the pieces of it out to you and say, hey, can you get these cleaned up? So I'll quit nagging you when you get done, and unfortunately, because of the setup of the system, I'm afraid that's the way I just get to be the nag for that one. But if you have any questions or you have any worries or you have any trouble dealing with the telephone companies, at this point, we've got a really good relationship with most of the organizations involved, and generally we've been able to solve problems pretty quickly. And then at West's request, I want to point out one more time that after the switch, all edits have to be made through the GIS data. And the reason I'm bringing it up and the reason they have requested it is because you will still be able to see the data in 911 Net, that any changes you make there will not affect the data and will not be implemented. So you might think you just solved a problem, like, ooh, I'm going to run to 911 Net and fix this right quick because I don't have time to do my GIS data right now, but you didn't actually solve anything. The submission that you make will not get approved, and it won't go through to the data, even if it is exactly what you want. Because the rule is, once you have a GeoMSAG, only GIS updates it. I'm working with West to try and get them to return either a message on the screen that tells you that it will not work, or to at least move you to read-only status so that you won't be able to submit something through 911 Net thinking you've solved a problem when you haven't. But right now, it'll look like you fixed something and you didn't. And then if you could go one more. Cool. So these are just a few things that I wanted to kind of reiterate. Like I just discussed, if you don't have 100% alignment before you switch, you'll have to get there after. And before you switch, you have access to those records. You can see them. You can sort of do things at your own pace and in your own order. But once you have switched, the only way to see those errored records is when I send you the report. And I can't actually see those records either. The only people that can are the supervisors of the AT&T database unit, and so they produce that report for me and send it to me periodically. So it's very easy to lose track of them because they're not present and sort of available. That's why there's, like I said earlier, so much nagging going on. But if you haven't done this process yet and you have the time, the energy, and everything else to get all of your phone numbers cleaned up, and by all of them, I don't mean every single record in the system. I mean every one that has a real viable address. We all know that there are some in there that have addresses like Morton County, or maybe even the address of no known address or something like that. Those records, we understand what those are. Everybody understands what those are, and that they can be hard, if not impossible, to clean up. But for the ones that have valid addresses, or have addresses that could be edited to be valid. If you can get them cleaned up ahead of time, it saves a whole lot of work for everybody. The big thing is that comprehension of both GIS data and the MSAG, and communication between you guys and us, between us and West, and between everybody in the telephone companies involved are really key to getting all of this going. So it is quite an organizational, sort of a complex organization to keep moving, but we really can get through it as long as we're all talking. So if you have any problems, please feel free to send them along to me or communicate about them, because they can get solved. We just may have to drag a few people in on the conversation. And the final thing that we have learned pretty easily is that if your GIS data is straight and you keep it up to date, you don't have to do anything else. All of the other complication that sort of comes along with this process vanishes. There's no signing into 911 net. There's no more dealing with telephone records, that kind of thing, because the system really does, once you have converted over to a GeoMSAG, work pretty flawlessly as long as your GIS data is coming in good shape. So that is my update, and thank you guys very much. And as I've said a couple of times, let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. Now it's on to Kristen for the toolbox update.
This is Kristen Jordan Koenig, and I've got a toolbox update. All right, so hopefully you all got the email last week about the new version of the toolbox, and there aren't too many, there's not a large quantity of changes this time around, but some of them will impact the results that you're getting when you run the validation tools. Like Sherry said, we removed the Mooney and the zip from the address point frequency test so that the errors will match what West is doing. So if you start getting duplicates, try and make sure to look at the MSAG field in your address points and make sure those are differentiating the points. We're also including the polygon topology check for the ESB layers, and those are going to report back as notices right now. Those will be switched over to errors eventually, but we wanted to give you guys the longest heads up possible that this was going to be checked. So at this point, you can look for the notices, and those will become errors eventually. Some other improvements did speed up some tests, so it might run slightly faster than it has in the past. Also fixed an issue with the data comparison tool. This had been broken for a while, but nobody told me, so I guess nobody's using it, so that's okay. And also fixed various TN check road name issues. And looking ahead, we'll see what happens. A lot of the tests right now in the validation toolbox are edited based on what West is doing in their data testing. We really want to know how West is testing the data so that we can emulate that in the toolbox to give everyone the biggest heads up possible of potential tweaks with the data that we need to do. So as we progress with West, yes, things might change with the toolbox. And I know it feels difficult to have these things change pretty frequently, especially when they impact your data and can end up being a fair amount of work. However, since we're working with so many people down the line who are doing additional data testing, we really want to give everybody the first heads up possible on things that Wes is going to be testing for. Future tests also depend on bug reports. You guys are great about emailing me when something isn't working, and please continue to do that. It makes the toolbox better and better, and so that it crashes less and less. And I really appreciate those. Don't feel like you're bugging me or you're emailing me all the time or whatever. Go ahead, send it. I'm used to it by now, so it's all good. And I think that's it for my update. And yeah, sign up to check imagery. There's a lot to do, and we need help.
That's her last minute plea.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kristen. Okay, just a few more things to discuss before we wrap up here. I looked at the portal to see if we had made any major modifications or changes as far as GIS submissions, and there's really no major updates or changes that affect how you process your submissions, so really nothing to report there. I did add this little bit. So back when Sherry was talking about PSAP review of responders for the alley display, I wanted to bring up this map as well, in case it wasn't mentioned earlier, just so you know that this is something we've been asking the PSAP operations managers or the PSAP GIS data steward to actually do this review. So like Sherry said, it's basically an interactive map. It's on the 911 portal. So they have to sign in, and once they click on a particular module, it displays the map for their PSAP. And really what they're doing is reviewing the fire lawn EMS names in the AT&T legacy database to see if any of that needs to be updated so that when a call handler sees that in the alley display, it's as current as possible. So at this time, this is only affecting the PSAPs that have migrated or are migrating soon to the EZNet, so it's kind of during this transition phase. We're contacting PSAPs as needed. So if you've not been contacted, you just haven't migrated or are on the short-term schedule for migration, we're just rolling it out as needed. So again, we're asking the operations manager and data steward to do this, and I want to make you aware of it in case you get some questions about it, because what happens every time someone sees a map, they're like, oh great, I can just have my maintainer take care of this, or someone else can do this for me. So in case you get questions about that, we really need the operation manager or the data steward's internal knowledge of those names to make sure that data is correct. So just kind of a reminder that that's going on. Just a couple more items. Upcoming events. So the next and final GIS Data Steward Certification class for 2018 will be held in conjunction with the Kansas APCO Conference on October 8th in Salina. I should have repeated this with the bullet below, but conference registration is not required at APCO to attend that class. So we'll be putting out a link to register just to get a head count so we know how many are coming, what materials we need to prepare for that, or it'll be out on the APCO website soon. So if you have a data steward that still needs to get certified, please encourage them to come to that class. That's the last one for 2018. And then also the final GIS Data Maintainer Certification class for the year will be held in conjunction with the CAM conference. Same thing, conference registration is not required. And the new feature for this certification class is that Sherry is unable to attend, so Kristen and I will be presenting this GIS Data Maintainer Certification class. So I think the content and slides will be very similar to previous classes, but I know Kristen's going to add a little more toolbox information in there as well. So if you're interested, please go ahead and get signed up for that. I want to mention a couple other things going on at the CAM conference. I hope you all can attend that. It's October 17th through 19th in Manhattan. In addition to the GIS Data Maintainer Certification class, we'll also be holding our Q4 GIS user group in a session at the conference. And Kristen will be presenting a behind the scenes of the Next Gen 911 Toolbox session. So that promises to be very exciting and really, it's kind of neat to dig into the toolbox because there's so much, so many helpful tools in there now that I think you get focused on validation and doing that, but there's a lot to explore in there. So that'll be a neat opportunity to kind of let Kristen, the developer, explore the whole toolbox with you and answer any questions you have about using the toolbox. So there's my plug for CAM. And then finally, it's just our usual wrap up. Thank you so much for coming. Please frequently check the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council website. There's a GIS page on that website, or the DASC website under Initiatives Next Gen 911 for updates to the program or any other information we've posted that is relevant for public audiences. We will be posting, I've recorded this webinar, so once the recording wraps up, and I'll try to get that posted out there either today or tomorrow on those websites. So nice way to refer back if you were able to join us on time or had some questions and would just like to view it again, or you just want to share with your friends, that's fine too. So, okay, well with that, I don't see anything in the chat screen. So if anyone has any questions, if you want to submit a chat real quick, otherwise we'll wrap up for the day. As always, feel free to contact Kristen or Sherry and I with any questions you have regarding geospatial call routing or the toolbox or the portal or whatever it might be project. Okay, well, I am not seeing any chats from anyone except for a thank you. So yes, thank you for joining us. Let's see, Sherry raised her hand, so I think she wants to talk again. So I'm going to, let's see here. All right, Sherry, let's see if you're unmuted now. Sherry, can you, let's see.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can, great.
Okay, great. I've had a couple of people ask me how long it takes for a GeoMSAG to be updated once the data is submitted to the portal. And so I wanted to pass along that right now, this is not for conversion, this is after conversion, that it takes roughly 3 to 4 business days from the day your data is submitted to the NG911 portal until it shows up in your GeoMSAG. They are hoping to have that speeded up by the end of the year, but for right now, it is 3 to 4 days, and I wouldn't count on it speeding up real quick. I know they're working on it, and they really want it to go a lot faster, but like I explained earlier, there's a lot of moving parts there, so do be aware that that delay is introduced once you're moved to a GeoMSAG.
Okay, great. And we also had a question asking us to show the slide again that had the buy-up, the imagery buy-up contact information, so I put that onto the screen. So not seeing any other hands raised or comments, I think we'll wrap it up today. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope to see many of you at the CAM conference, or I'll talk to you sometime soon if you have any questions. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.